Rudy Giuliani saying, quote, trial by combat, end quotes, is simply outrageous, and there is no place for that in our nation. I want to let my fellow Georgians know that today I will be extending the previous executive order that has activated the Georgia National Guard. That will continue to be in place this coming Monday, and they will be called up as needed. I feel confident that they will not. We have to come together in this state and in this country as we move forward. Now I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Governor Duncan.
Thank you, Governor Kemp. I join you in as strongly and as vehemently as I can condemning the rioting and violence at our U.S. Capitol and other places across this country. Today is an incredibly sobering reminder of how delicate our democracy truly is. It is also a reminder of how dangerous it is when people in power act as if they are more important than that democracy. I call on Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, to speak with all the clarity in the world as to exactly what Americans should do at this point in Washington, D.C. They should exit the Capitol peacefully, and they should allow democracy to once again shine. I want to speak directly to Georgians, every Georgian that can hear my voice. Put down your differences, put down your partisanship, and pick up your freedom. God bless this great state of Georgia, and God bless America.
Speaker.
All right, the Speaker Ralston going to give some remarks too. We heard, of course, from Governor Kemp, who is calling what's happening in D.C. with the mob, anarchy, and un-American, asking that all Georgians come together, saying we have to move forward. A very strong message from the Lieutenant Governor as well. These are the first public comments that they have given since the Trump supporters breached the U.S. Capitol in Washington. There's a lot of reaction from Georgia's congressional delegation. We're going to keep going with our local coverage for you on 11alive.com and our 11 Alive YouTube channel. For those of you watching on TV, we're going to take you back now to NBC's special report in the nation's capital.
minded verbiage out there about, hurting the republic and the democracy and all of that. But truth be told, when you see violence like this and when there is this undercurrent of belief, despite the hardcore evidence, whether it's from the GBI or other law enforcement, that there somehow or other has been debauchery involved with the results of this election. I mean, it does create this serious undercurrent of whether we can function as a country, as a government.
Well, it does, and it only creates that question when the rhetoric gets beyond the sort of disappointment with losing an election. I've won and lost elections. It's better to win. It always feels better. But I've never run across an election where the actual process itself was undermined and people who tried to correct them with facts and set the record straight were called liars and traitors and un-American. It's a really poisonous level of rhetoric.
Dr. Gillespie, I have a lot I want to get into you with as far as your take on this and your view and moving forward, what we're looking at in the days ahead.
Hey, mic check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, mic check.
I'm in the 11 Alive newsroom with special coverage for you this afternoon alongside Natisha Lance. Governor Brian Kemp made his first public comments since rioters took siege of the U.S. state capitol just a few moments ago. He said, quote, "It is unimaginable that we have people in our state and in our country breaking into government buildings," adding, "This is not the Georgia way. This is not the way of our country." Natisha, he called it un-American and anarchy.
Cheryl, there's really no words to describe what we have been seeing over the past couple of hours at the nation's capital. We do want to be clear that what we are seeing, the situation in D.C., is unlike anything we have seen in recent history. The last time the Capitol was evacuated was back on 9/11. All of this is playing out as Congress was meeting today to count the electoral vote. The process halted after President Trump's supporters stormed the Capitol. The House and Senate both evacuated, including Georgia congressional members. We want to take you through some of the comments that we are getting from some of those congressional members and some of our local leaders here. This coming from Reverend Raphael Warnock. He says, in this moment of unrest, violence, and anger, we must remember the words of Dr. King. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Let each of us try to be a light to see our country out of this dark moment. And Representative Barry Loudermilk says violence against our brave law enforcement is not in line with our values as freedom-loving Americans. I strongly support our rights to peacefully protest, but strongly condemn any acts of violence against our brave officers of the Capitol Police or others. Marjorie Taylor Greene, this is Buddy Carter. He says the violence and anarchy is unacceptable and must end. Please listen to Donald Trump's call to stay peaceful immediately. Thank you to our Capitol Police and law enforcement. And Marjorie Taylor Greene says, be safe, be smart, stay peaceful, obey the laws. This is not a time for violence. This is a time to support President Trump and support election integrity. And she says, God bless at the end. Cheryl.
Natisha, it's important to mention Georgia's lieutenant governor also came out along with David Ralston, the speaker, saying, in the words of Lieutenant Governor Duncan, quote, today is a reminder how dangerous it is when people in power think that they are above democracy. And all of this happening on a day where both U.S. Senate runoff races were called for the Democrats in Georgia. NBC projecting John Ossoff has won the seat over the incumbent Republican Senator Kelly Loeffler, and Reverend Raphael Warnock, the projected winner over, Perdue, and then Warnock, the winner over Senator Loeffler, of course. So with those two seats, the balance of power in the Senate would then go to the Democrats. And the governor said that we have to come together in this state and this country and move forward from this day on. When the rioters stormed the Capitol, members of the House and Senate were evacuated. Senator Kelly Loeffler was among them. She traveled to Washington, D.C. to be part of a group of Republican senators who were objecting to the certification of the election for President-elect Joe Biden. Overnight, she did not concede to Reverend Warnock. She did talk about traveling to D.C. today to, in her words, fight for President Trump.
In the morning, in fact, I'm going to be heading to Washington, D.C. to keep fighting. That's right. We're going to fight for this president. So I'm asking for every single Georgian, every single American, stay in the fight with us. We are going to keep fighting for you. This is about protecting the American dream. I'm never going to stop fighting for this country, for the American dream.
We have been in touch with the governor's office. They say that everything has been calm around the Georgia Capitol. They say the Georgia State Patrol is on standby. The previous executive order having the National Guard on standby is still in effect in the state of Georgia.
I'm Jeff Hullinger with our political analyst, Dr. Andrew Gillespie, a political science professor at Emory University, and the Republican strategist, Mike Hassinger. Dr. Gillespie, let's talk about what we are looking at, not only today, but what about tomorrow and the next day? There are 14 days left with President Trump's term in the White House. Does this continue, or is this a one-time stand, do you believe?
No, it's not a one-time stand. This reflects long-term, deep-seated beliefs, one, about the outcome of the election. And President Trump has not relented. In the speech, the video that he sent to his supporters to tell them to stand down, he didn't do the one critical thing that needed to be done to turn the temperature down on what was going on, which was to tell his supporters that he lost the election, that even though the protest was going on in Congress, that it was ultimately going to end in Congress voting to certify the results of the election, and that he is in fact going to be leaving office on January 20th. So he's fed a group of supporters a bill of lies for weeks about how there was a loophole, there was a way to overturn the results of the election when there weren't any more loopholes left, and he hasn't actually brought people to the place of accepting the new administration that's coming in, and he hasn't given them the tools to be able to deal with that and to also fight fair, which is to stand for office again in 4 years or to run for other offices in the future and to carry on the legacy. If you want to have a policy debate, that's fine, but you don't storm the Capitol and try to intimidate people into voting illegally to overturn the results of a legitimate election. So I haven't seen good leadership there, and I haven't seen people actually being brought to a place where they're actually able to understand the true facts of this election, and they're able to accept those facts and the results that come from them.
Mike, you've been a political strategist for a very long time on the Republican side. What about the damage not only to the Republican Party, but to how we govern? And that is a rather broad, sort of all-encompassing kind of statement. But when you see this violence, you see what went on today, and you think about what we are witnessing and its impact on us long term, there is a reason for great concern.
Yeah, there is a reason for great concern. One of the old jokes about campaigning is, you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. And that's just been thrown out the window in the era of President Trump. We no longer campaign in poetry. We campaign in a spittle-flecked rage of invective and name-calling, and we don't govern at all. I think that the Republican Party needs to take a good, hard, long look at how they dealt with a leader who so dominated them without having any other principles, without having any history of being elected to office, and without having any interest, any apparent interest in the ability to govern. He is a bull in a china shop who thrives on chaos. And today's events were the culmination of 4 years of pushing the norm and pushing the Overton window and increasing the level of rhetoric and tuning it up to 11 every day.
Dr. Gillespie, does this change President-elect Joe Biden's interactions with the Republicans and with Donald Trump? Does he now take on a different tact here in the next 2 weeks?
Yes and no. I mean, some of the path was already set forward. President-elect Biden was trying to find ways that he could be conciliatory, but also push forward an agenda that's about making progress, that's not about, engaging in some of the dilatory behavior of the Trump administration and addressing issues that have been neglected in the waning days of the Trump administration. I think what's going to be harder with this is if there are people, particularly people who are still in prominent leadership positions within the Republican Party and within the Republican caucus in Congress, who are still going to support the president, who are still going to make excuses for the president, because what that signals to President-elect Biden is it may actually be really hard to work with those people, because not only would they obstruct for partisan reasons, but they also were going to obstruct because they still feel like they're caught up in Donald Trump's orbit. And so, I think he's going to be looking for the signs as to who was willing to stand up to the president in this particular moment, and then who wasn't willing to stand up to the president in this moment. And that might be a signal of how easy it's going to be able to be conciliatory.
Mike, I know you got to be out of here in about 45 seconds, so give me about a 20-second response here. Do you think the certification needs to continue tonight in the face of this threat?
I think the certification needs to continue as quickly as possible to show that this country and the Constitution are not governed by mobs and not intimidated by mobs. That absolutely has to happen as quickly, as safely as it can be done. I absolutely agree with that.
Mike Hassinger, Dr. Andrew Gillespie, thank you. We'll talk with you soon.
Earlier today, we saw a much smaller group of Trump supporters protest at the state capitol. Our Paulo Ciro is there now, and she joins us live. Paulo?
Yeah, well, we know that earlier today also Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger was walked out of the state capitol, I'm told for security reasons, after what happened in Washington, D.C., and he was then approved to work remotely after that. But I'm told it wasn't only security for what happened in Washington, D.C., also that small group that we talked about, really not a lot of people left. Honestly, I could count them with my hands. I think there's just 3 people across the street from me right now. But earlier today, I do want to show you what it looked like. I know we have some video of that. When I drove here around 1 o'clock, there was a small group of peaceful protesters and Donald Trump supporters. A lot of them have since left. Many of them were carrying American flags and signs reading "Stop the Steal." But this was especially peaceful compared to what happened in Washington, D.C. today. Just now, Governor Brian Kemp and Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan addressed the situation that happened in Washington, D.C. They condemned the actions of what happened today.
That has been a disgrace and, quite honestly, un-American. As you all know, in Georgia, we had peaceful protests all summer long, allowing people to let their voice be heard on an array of issues that we had going on in our state and in our country at that time. But we certainly did not allow anarchy, and we will not allow that now here in the state of Georgia.
Now, Governor Kemp also said that they're going to work on many security measures for the state capitol here. I know earlier today, the spokesperson with the Secretary of State's office told me that the capitol did remain open. I know we were allowed to be in there and out, and also other employees who work for the Secretary of State's office, they were able to go home. They were approved to work remotely as well.
Hello, thank you. Well, less than an hour ago, President Donald Trump released a video on Twitter, and in that video, he addresses the angry mob at the U.S. Capitol, but he refuses to actually condemn what was happening there.
But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this.
The president also tweeted a request for respect for law and order and law enforcement officers. His tone is a change from this morning when he incited a cheering crowd at his Save America rally to march to the Capitol as lawmakers debated the Electoral College vote.
After this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol.
And the president's remarks are in stark contrast to the response from President-elect Joe Biden, who called on President Trump to demand an end to the insurrection on Capitol Hill, saying democracy is under unprecedented assault.
I call on this mob to pull back and allow the work of democracy to go forward. You've heard me say before in different contexts, the words of a president matter, no matter how good or bad that president is. At their best, the words of a president can inspire. At their worst, they can incite.
The president-elect concluded by saying America is so much better than what we're seeing today.
About an hour ago, in the midst of the chaos in Washington, D.C., NBC News and the Associated Press called the second of two Georgia Senate races for the Democrat Jon Ossoff. He has now ousted Republican Senator David Perdue. He leads by more than 27,000 votes, and right now Ossoff is above that threshold of a 5%. 0.5%, a half percentage point margin to avoid a recount, a number we'd all been watching very closely earlier today. That means it is a clean sweep for the Democrats, as early this morning those news organizations called the other Senate race for Reverend Raphael Warnock defeating Senator Kelly Loeffler. Reverend Warnock now leads by nearly 65,000 votes. That means the Senate is now a 50-50 split among Democrats and Republicans. Vice President-elect Kamala Harris would be the tie-breaking vote. Let's check in with Chief Investigative Reporter Brendan Keefe with a closer analysis of the votes. We saw the gaps continue to widen for the Democrats through the course of this day.
Yeah, absolutely, Cheryl. It's important to just take a step back for a second and say, on any other decade, this would be the story of the year. It isn't even the top story today. Erica Shields is the new police chief in Louisville. That didn't even make the news. That's because of what's going on at the U.S. Capitol, and this has a lot to do with it. They're connected, right? So first, let's take a look at the numbers. Jon Ossoff, obviously, as you mentioned, leading Perdue by more than 27,000 votes. Remember, Joe Biden won the state of Georgia with less than 12,000 votes. So this is significant now. It is above, as you mentioned, that half a point threshold. It is now more than 0.6% and continuing to grow. So where did the votes come from? All eyes of the nation were on DeKalb County last night because we're actually the first to call it in terms of there's a lot of the vote outstanding from DeKalb County. The reason is we were able to compare the numbers from the general election, and we knew there were about 350,000 votes coming from DeKalb County, but we only had a little more than 100,000 in. We knew there was at least, with this kind of break, this kind of margin, there was enough vote there, obviously, for Jon Ossoff to pick up. and it turns out that prediction was correct. As you can see, it now is in that margin or that number of 340,000 some odd votes, and now that's what pushed Jon Ossoff really because the counties that are left, there aren't that many votes still out there, but the counties that are left are the blue and deep blue. There were only a couple of red counties with only a small number of votes, 3 digits, not going to change the outcome. That is why you'll notice there is a check mark next to Jon Ossoff's name because NBC News has called it, the Washington Post, et cetera, CNN, all of them. So he will be the youngest senator in the U.S. Senate since Joe Biden in the 1970s, which is extraordinary when you think about it. Also, we want to point out the balance of power in the U.S. Senate. This before was a maybe kind of sort of. We now know that these 2 Senate seats from Georgia are now on the left side of the aisle. You have that 50-50 split, but remember that you have Kamala Harris as vice president as of noon on the 20th of this month, and that will be the tie-breaking vote because the vice president is the president of the U.S. Senate, and that will now throw control of the U.S. Senate to the Democrats. And I say that at this very moment, the U.S. Senate is in the control of a siege mob. Think of that right now, the Republican-controlled Senate, just before it's going to become a Democratic-controlled Senate, is currently under the control of a siege mob that has stormed the U.S. Capitol. That's certainly something we didn't predict today. Despite everything we saw, it's very tough to watch, but it's another thing to point out. Even though this essentially is decided, 1 seat will remain Kelly Loeffler until these 2 races are certified. And that's an important point because you're saying, okay, when are we going to see a swearing-in ceremony? And the point is, Kelly Loeffler is the sitting senator because she was appointed by Governor Kemp to fill out Johnny Isakson's term. That term goes until the end of 2022, 3 days into 2023. She will hold that seat and that appointment until Raphael Warnock is certified as the winner. When is that going to happen? It could be as late as next week because you have until Friday of the following week for the counties to certify, and then even the following Friday after that for the state to certify. We don't expect it to take that long. But it is important to point out that we only have 1 U.S. Senator from Georgia right now that is sitting in at those the electoral vote count, and one of them is Kelly Loeffler, who will be vacating that job shortly. But in the meantime, she is able to actually object to the Georgia electoral vote count. Fascinating and interesting times we're in. So Raphael Warnock will not be sworn in anytime soon, and it's also important to point out that neither will Jon Ossoff. But just popping over here, David Perdue is also not a U.S. Senator right now because his term expired on January 3rd at noon. So there is no senator for that seat right now. Perdue not returning to the U.S. Capitol. That's the story here in terms of the numbers. I know we have a lot more news today, but this is a huge deal because remember that you have statewide races here. And one more thing we have to point out, and I know we've talked about this before, but it was all hypothetical before this, that before you had this runoff system that was set up to prevent black candidates from winning, because once black Georgians were franchised, when they got the franchise for the vote, they were still a minority of the population, and they wanted to prevent, meaning the white establishment, black candidates from succeeding. The runoff system was invented to prevent that from happening, and in a runoff election last night, Raphael Warnock became the first black senator from the state of Georgia. And also it's important to point out that David Perdue would be the senator right now without the runoff system because he won handily in November, but just below 50%.
Yeah, 80,000 votes to be specific in November, but did not meet that threshold. And today, Reverend Warnock told us here live on 11 Alive how significant the point you made of the history making, being the first African-American U.S. Senator voted from the state of Georgia, his home state, where he grew up, where his family still lives, what that means to him personally, and what he feels the significance is for our state. Brendan,
Cheryl,
thank you so much. Oh, go ahead.
You do have to ask yourself, would we be sitting here right now with 2 Democratic senators from Georgia? It's a good question. Had the last 2 months of Donald Trump fighting the Georgia election results and the other swing states had not occurred, and if we weren't in this situation that we are tonight, Donald Trump was on the ballot. We know that because the only other Republican race was easily won by the Republican in this election last night.
Yeah. Interesting point. All right. Thank you so much, Brendan. For the latest results, you can always find them on 11alive.com. We can also send them right to your phone if you'd like. Just text the word results to the number on your screen. That number is 404-885-7600. A scary situation, no way around it for lawmakers on Capitol Hill as Trump rioters breached the building this afternoon in a siege. Georgia lawmakers among those evacuated. Doug Richards joining us live now after talking with Congresswoman Nikema Williams, who was just sworn into office last week. Doug.
Yes, I talked with Congresswoman Williams a little less than an hour ago. She called me from what she described as an undisclosed location. She wouldn't tell me exactly where she is. She says that she has been ordered to stay in that location on the Capitol complex, which includes the Capitol building and the House office buildings that are across the street, basically, for the duration until the insurrection is brought under control. And while we were talking, she described how she had gone in early this morning because she knew that there was going to be this debate over the Electoral College results. She wanted to be prepared for it. She wanted to participate in it. And then this thing sort of broke out. Here's what we talked about.
This morning, we were told to expect heavy protest presence, and I got here early so that I was here before the activity was supposed to start. And I told myself that this is one of the safest building in the country. I'll be okay once I'm inside. And it didn't turn out that way.
Are you scared or more angry?
I am scared right now. This moment is very tense right now. And I am still on lockdown, and I don't know when I'm going to be able to leave the location that I'm in, and it's scary.
And have you encountered any of the protesters yourself?
I can hear them, but I have not encountered them face to face. No.
Do you feel like your safety is threatened at this moment?
I do.
What do you think needs to happen?
All of the Republicans who signed on to say that they were going to challenge today's electoral voting counting process, they need to reach out to their supporters and tell them to leave the Capitol grounds.
Nikema Williams, the member of Congress from Georgia's 5th Congressional District, she, of course, succeeded into the seat that had been held until the summer by Congressman John Lewis. She made a couple of other points. She said that in addition to the Republicans challenging the Electoral College vote in the chamber today during today's process that got short-circuited by the protest, she said that in addition to those folks denouncing the protesters and telling them to call it off and go home, she said that President Trump needs to do the same thing. Right after we talked, President Trump recorded that audio on Twitter where he did ask them to go home, although he did not denounce the protest or the tactics specifically. She also made another point, which was that she fully expects for Congress to get on with the business that the people sent them there to do, including first and foremost the ratification of the Electoral College vote. But she was unwilling to make a prediction as to when that could happen based on the fact that she's still on lockdown and the security situation was still fluid, as they say. Back to you.
How much did you talk about what would happen next? We're seeing more and more of the delegation on Twitter saying, hey, we are going to stay tonight. We're going to get this done. We're not going to, in their words, quote, bow to thugs. How much did she talk about the work ahead? And did she, at that point when you talked, know of a plan for the hours of the evening hours tonight?
She did not know of the plan. She sounded like she was in seclusion to some extent. She said that she was with other people, but that a lot of her information was also coming from Twitter and from colleagues who she had been texting with. So But to answer your question, there was certainly a strong measure of determination in her voice when she talked about resuming the work and completing the Electoral College ratification. She was not specific about whether it was going to get done tonight, and she really said, she indicated that, you know, it could be a matter of days based on how the security situation goes down at the Capitol. But she was confident that it was going to be done, and she was confident that it would allow Joe Biden to get sworn in on January 20th.
All right, Doug Richards reporting. Thanks a lot, Doug.
The chaos in D.C. overshadowing the Georgia Senate runoff this evening. So let's go now to Andy Parati, who's been following the two Democratic candidates today on what their projected wins mean to them as well as their families.
So far, Raphael Warnock has issued a statement in response to the unrest in the Capitol. In the meantime, OSSOFF and Warnock both released video statements earlier today directly speaking to Georgians who did not vote for them. Tonight, a Black Atlanta pastor and a Jewish millennial small business owner declare victories in Georgia's race for the U.S. Senate.
I am going to the Senate to work for all of Georgia.
I thank the people of Georgia for electing me to serve you in the United States Senate.
John Ossoff posted this video at 8 a.m. pledging to address the pandemic and the economy while speaking directly to the millions of Georgians who did not vote for him.
Whether you were for me or against me, I'll be for you in the U.S. Senate.
Reverend Raphael Warnock promised the same and urged unity.
No matter who you cast your vote for in this election, in this moment in American history, Washington has a choice to make. In fact, all of us have a choice to make.
Warnock, on course to be Georgia's first Black U.S. Senator, shared his mom's reaction.
Of course, she was glad to be speaking to her son, but as moms do, she reminded me that she's still mama, therefore she's in charge. And I'm very clear about that.
Warnock says he hopes his story inspires young people that they can achieve the American dream. Ossoff also thanked his wife, who is an OBGYN already back to work in the hospital.
And Mama is always in charge, no matter what happens. Well, as Georgia continues to count votes, there's a lot of focus on how Black turnout helped propel Warnock and Ossoff to these projected wins, particularly in DeKalb County, as we heard Brendan mention earlier. Naima Abdullahi is in Decatur. Naima?
DeKalb County celebrated the role it played last night, not necessarily because the turnout of the DeKalb votes were a surprise, but specifically because of the timing and of exactly when it happened and how it narrowed that margin. Late into the night, DeKalb appeared to be the ground zero as the county's votes came in, shifting the lead in favor of the Democratic candidates.
Black voters matter. That in fact what we see is what has propelled this victory has been led by Black voters.
Latasha Brown, the co-founder of Black Voters Matter Fund, says all the year-long efforts from Black-led voting groups came down to this very moment to witness, as she calls it, a new South rising.
The people of Georgia have actually become stronger. That in fact that they have become more resilient and more focused.
Of the 4.4 million votes that were tallied, Black voters played a key role in the early voter turnout and on election day. Bernard Fraga, associate professor of political science at Emory University, says the dynamics are shifting.
Georgia's undoubtedly now a purple state. It's a state that's going to see a change of power. We're again going to continue to see Georgia being competitive in statewide elections.
While the results of DeKalb County was not a surprise, the timing played a huge part while the margin was really narrow.
This is probably the most important election in the history of the state of Georgia. And
Dr. Maurice Hobson, an African-American studies professor at Georgia State, says the state of Georgia makes for an interesting case study of Black political empowerment and canvassing during key elections.
Black Atlanta showed herself mightily last night. This idea of voting not based on race, it's based on democracy. If for those who truly believe in this country.
And coming up at 6, we will show you a Metro Atlanta County that tipped the scale and made all the difference last night when the votes were coming in. Back to you.
And Naima, I want to ask you, because you are from Decatur, so you've grown up in that area, you've seen how this shift has happened there politically. What do you make of all this?
I think it really comes down to organizing and mobilizing the efforts of the community to make sure that there is this energy that every vote counts, every vote can make a difference, has really been a consistent energy throughout this election process from November 4th to now. So I think a lot of people strongly believe, where back then maybe the energy was a little bit different, that every vote matters. And that's why we see this momentum, this historic momentum, this historic turnout that is playing a pivotal role not only in the state but nationwide as well.
All right, Naima Abdullahi, thank you so much. Cheryl?
In Fulton County, they were supposed to be adjudicating ballots this afternoon, but the process was halted this afternoon as the chaos in Washington, D.C. unfolded. Shanu Hurd joining us live now in Fulton. Shanu?
Well, Cheryl, just about an hour ago, Fulton County officials say they are stopping all ballot counting and tabulations for the day because of that riot in Washington, D.C. today. But earlier, just minutes before workers were going to start adjudicating ballots, a Fulton County worker came into the room and told everyone they were postponing the adjudication process because of what was going on in Washington, D.C. They say it was a precaution for the safety of workers, adjudicators, and also media members who were inside to cover that adjudication process. Now, some adjudicators were actually upset this was happening. They pushed back, but a Fulton County worker, the one who told us this was getting postponed, had to calmly tell everyone this is for everyone's safety. So they postponed the process and got everyone out of the prep center here in Northwest Atlanta. Now, right now, Fulton County Sheriff's deputies are outside of the prep center here. They say that they're going to just be here to look after the building for now. Again, this is all being done out of precaution and safety. Now, Fulton County officials are postponing that process until further notice. I did ask when that would start back up. Right now, they don't have an answer. So we're still waiting to see when that's going to be. And just to clarify and for context, the ballots that were going to be here for the adjudication process are the 3,000 to 4,000 absentee ballots that came into the Georgia World Congress Center last night. Those were absentee ballots that were picked up during the day on Election Day yesterday. So again, right now we still don't know when that process is going to start up again, but also important to note, Fulton County did shut down the government building as well as the health department building today because of this. So all of this being done out of precaution.
All right, Shanu Hurd reporting in Fulton County. Thank you, Shanu. We've now heard from Representative Lucy McBath. She tweeted, "My staff and I are safe. The actions of those seeking to overturn the will of the people are dangerous and destructive, but they will not succeed." We'll continue our coverage here for you in just a moment.
Just want to make a few comments about the activities that we've seen today and let you know, in my opinion, that that has been a disgrace and quite honestly un-American. As you all know, in Georgia, we had peaceful protests all summer long, allowing people to let their voice be heard on an array of issues that we had going on in our state and in our country at that time. But we certainly did not allow anarchy, and we will not allow that now here in the state of Georgia. It is unimaginable that we have people in our state and our country that have been threatening police officers, breaking into government buildings. This is not the Georgia way, and it is not the way of our country. An individual being shot during the middle of these activities, that I don't even know the details on that, while they were there, is unimaginable. And for those of you that have been calling on a special session, you can now see what that would have looked like. Rudy Giuliani saying, quote, "trial by combat," end quotes, is simply outrageous, and there's no place for that in our nation. I want to let my fellow Georgians know that today I will be extending the previous executive order that has activated the Georgia National Guard. That will continue to be in place this coming Monday, and they will be called up as needed. I feel confident that they will not. We have to come together in this state and in this country as we move forward.
The governor, the lieutenant governor, and Speaker Ralston there, the Republican leadership here in the state of Georgia with very strong sentiments there, Natisha. They spoke just about an hour ago for the first time publicly since the riot started in our nation's capital. We want to be direct. The situation in D.C. is unlike anything we have seen in recent history. The last time the Capitol was evacuated was during the terrorist attack on 9/11.
You know, Cheryl, all of this is playing out as Congress was meeting today to count the electoral vote. That process was halted after President Trump's supporters stormed the Capitol. The House and Senate both evacuated, including Georgia congressional members. I want to read some reactions that we are getting from local leaders tonight. We just heard from Lucy McBath recently, who said, "My staff and I are safe. The actions of those seeking to overturn the will of the people are dangerous and destructive, but they will not succeed." Going on to the next one, we've also heard from Reverend Raphael Warnock. He says, "In this moment of unrest, violence, and anger, we must remember the words of Dr. King. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Let each of us try to be a light to see our country out of this dark moment." And Rep. Barry Loudermilk says, "Violence against our brave law enforcement is not in line with our values as freedom-loving Americans. I strongly support our rights to peacefully protest, but strongly condemn any acts of violence against our brave officers of the Capitol Police or others." And Marjorie Taylor Greene sends a message. She had a video with hers as well. She says, "To be safe, be smart, stay peaceful, obey the laws. This is not a time for violence. This is a time to support Trump and election integrity." And Representative Buddy Carter also says the violence and anarchy is unacceptable and must end. Please listen to President Trump's call to stay peaceful immediately. Thank you to our Capitol Police and law enforcement.
When the rioters stormed the Capitol, members of the House and Senate were evacuated. Senator Kelly Loeffler among them. She traveled to D.C. to be part of a group of Republican senators who were objecting to the certification of the election for President-elect Joe Biden. Overnight, she did not concede to Reverend Raphael Warnock, who is a projected winner in the state of Georgia for the U.S. Senate seat. She did, however, talk about traveling to D.C. today to, in her words, fight for President Trump.
In the morning, in fact, I'm going to be heading to Washington, D.C. to keep fighting. That's right. We're going to fight for this president. So I'm asking for every single Georgian, every single American, stay in the fight with us. We are going to keep fighting for you. This is about protecting the American dream. I'm never going to stop fighting for this country, for the American dream.
At her Twitter feed, and Senator Kelly Loeffler has not tweeted any comment about what's happened in Washington, D.C. In fact, she has not posted anything about the results of her election either, so no word yet from the Loeffler camp.
Less than an hour ago, President Donald Trump released a video on Twitter, and in that video, he addresses the angry mob at the U.S. Capitol, but he refuses to actually condemn what was happening there.
But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this.
The president also tweeted a request for respect for law and order and law enforcement officers. His tone is a change from this morning when he incited a cheering crowd at his Save America rally to march to the Capitol as lawmakers debated the Electoral College vote.
After this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol.
The president's remarks are in stark contrast to the response from President-elect Joe Biden, who called on President Trump to demand an end to the insurrection on Capitol Hill, saying democracy is under unprecedented assault.
I call on this mob to pull back and allow the work of democracy to go forward. You've heard me say before in different contexts, the words of a president matter, no matter how good or bad that president is. At their best, the words of a president can inspire. At their worst, they can incite.
The president-elect concluded by saying America is so much better than what we are seeing today. Earlier today, we saw a much smaller crowd of Trump supporters protest at the state capitol. Our Paulo Ciro is there now, and she joins us live. So, Paulo, the crowd was a little bigger earlier, but now things have kind of cleared out. What are you seeing?
Yeah, it's a lot smaller right now, but it's because of that crowd that Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger was actually walked out of the state capitol today. We're told it was for security reasons, not only because of what happened in Washington, D.C., but also because of that crowd. And you asked me what it looks like right now. I'm going to show you. It's a lot smaller. It's actually even smaller than probably what we saw just about 30 minutes ago when you guys came to me last. I could count them still with my hands, probably 3 or 4 of them. But earlier today, a much larger group. I mean, when I drove here around 1 o'clock, and I can show you that in the video, when I drove here around 1 o'clock, a much larger group of people gathered here. It was still a small group, however, especially when you compare it to what happened in Washington, D.C. today. It was very peaceful protesters out here, Donald Trump supporters. Some of them have since left, as I mentioned. Many of them, were carrying Trump flags, also carrying American flags and signs that were reading "Stop the Steal." But again, this was especially peaceful compared to what happened in Washington, D.C. And just now, just about an hour ago, actually, Governor Brian Kemp, Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, and House Speaker David Ralston addressed that situation, and they condemned the actions that happened in Washington, D.C. today.
That has been a disgrace and, quite honestly, un-American. As you all know, in Georgia, we had peaceful protests all summer long, allowing people to let their voice be heard on an array of issues that we had going on in our state and in our country at that time. But we certainly did not allow anarchy, and we will not allow that now here in the state of Georgia.
Now, although Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger was walked out earlier today, the Capitol still remained open, including for us. We were able to walk in and out. We do know that members of the Secretary's office, employees, were able to work remotely. They were sent home around 2 o'clock today. And as for Governor Kemp, he also mentioned that they will be working on safety protocols that will take place here at the state Capitol going forward.
Paolo, do you know? Well, we lost her. Well, we'll go to this. We just received this tweet from Atlanta Police. APD is saying, just like us, Atlanta Police say they're watching the situation in D.C. and coordinating with local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies to assist if protest or illegal activity occurs.
Doug Richards joining us now after speaking with Congresswoman Nikema Williams, who was just sworn into office last week. What a first week of office. Got to be a scary time there as everyone was evacuated. That's not happened since the 9/11 terrorist attacks, Doug.
You know, I mean, you got to figure you're a new member of Congress. Your head is probably already spinning anyway. And then you're going through this ritual that typically is just a ritual that takes place today, where you certify the vote of the Electoral College. And then protests come in, and you are told by the Capitol Police that you have to stay locked down. And so we talked with her by phone in what she described as an undisclosed location, somewhere within the Capitol complex. And she told us what it was like going into work this morning, expecting to do that work and having it interrupted. And here's what she told us.
This morning, we were told to expect heavy protest presence, and I got here early so that I was here before the activity was supposed to start. And I told myself that this is one of the safest building in the country. I'll be okay once I'm inside. And it didn't turn out that way.
Are you scared or more angry?
I am scared right now. This moment is very tense right now. and I am still on lockdown, and I don't know when I'm going to be able to leave the location that I'm in, and it's scary.
And have you encountered any of the protesters yourselves?
I can hear them, but I have not encountered them face to face. No.
Do you feel like your safety is threatened at this moment?
I do.
What do you think needs to happen?
All of the Republicans who signed on to say that they were going to challenge today's electoral voting counting process, they need to reach out to their supporters and tell them to leave the Capitol grounds.
So, and she also said that President Trump, who she said incited the whole thing, also needed to tell those folks not only to get out of the Capitol, but also to denounce the protesters. A few minutes later, President Trump actually did ask the protesters to leave the Capitol. And then we left the conversation with Congresswoman Nikema Williams talking about her desire to get the work over with, that she and other members of Congress are determined to actually do the job that they were elected to do and sent to Washington to do, and that they were trying to do today on the floor of the House, which is to certify the Electoral College vote when all this happened and everything was interrupted and this lockdown started and this sort of semi-crisis overtook Washington.
And yet the work they do never more important as we are hearing the move to certify the election by all intents and purposes would continue tonight, although the rioters are still there on the steps of the United States Capitol and people still hunkered down inside, Doug.
Yeah, she could not. I asked her what she thought was the likely timetable on that, and she said that there was no way for her to know. She said she was getting a lot of her information from Twitter and from text messages from some of her colleagues. She said that it could be tomorrow, it could be a few days from now, but the thing that she felt very confident about was that the vote would take place, the vote would affirm the election, and that Joe Biden would be sworn in as president on January 20th.
All right, January 20th seems like a long way away in this moment in time that we are all watching unfold together. Doug Richards, thanks for the update. We really appreciate it.
We have just learned a woman shot inside the U.S. Capitol has died, and that is according to several law enforcement officers who spoke to NBC News. So far, police have not offered a lot of details about what happened. Several other people, including an officer, were injured as the mob overtook the Capitol this afternoon. Just before 6 p.m., officials declared the Capitol was finally secure again after nearly 4 chaotic hours. Cheryl.
About an hour ago, in the midst of the chaos in Washington, D.C., NBC News and the Associated Press called the second of 2 Georgia Senate races for the Democrat, Jon Ossoff. Mr. Ossoff has ousted Republican Senator David Perdue. He leads by more than 27,000 votes at this hour, and right now Ossoff is above that threshold of 0.5% in his margin. That would avoid a recount. So that means it's a clean sweep for the Democrats. As early this morning, those news organizations called the other Senate race for Reverend Raphael Warnock, defeating Senator Kelly Loeffler. Reverend Warnock now leads by nearly 65,000 votes. That means the Senate is now a 50-50 split among Democrats and Republicans. Vice President-elect Kamala Harris would now provide any tie-breaking votes. Let's check back in with Chief Investigator Brendan Keefe with a closer analysis of the votes. An extraordinary day on so many fronts, history made in so many fronts, both in Georgia and sadly in the nation's capital as we speak.
It's such a tough day, Cheryl, but we also have this incredible development that Georgia was the center of the political universe, obviously, for the last couple of months. First in the presidential race, there was a good 36-hour period there where Georgia could have determined the whole presidential race. And as you know, it remained contentious for a couple of months. Then, of course, we had the dual runoffs that would decide ultimately the balance of power. And now we know it has shifted the balance of power. Now that the Capitol essentially is back in the control of law enforcement, hopefully they can rejoin that joint session. But also this means the Democrats will take over as soon as these 2 races are certified. And it's going to take that long. Plus, you also have to wait till January 20th because Kamala Harris doesn't become that tie-breaking vote until noon on January 20th. So let's get into the numbers. Actually, we just got a fresh batch in. Not a huge change, but now the margin is more than 30,000 votes in the OSSOFF Perdue race. More importantly than that, you want to look at this number right here. So right here, 3-4 and 3-6, when you add this up, the margin now is 0. Apologize for the graphics, 0.06, what I did the math a second ago, 34 and 34. Okay, so you've got 68, so 0.68. So you've got basically a margin now that is above that 0.5, I should say. Apologize for the misplaced decimal point there. So now we have a margin greater than 0.5%. It's 0.68%, and so that is now outside that margin. We still do have votes coming in, but where they're coming in is in these heavily blue areas. So we don't expect a big change. The military and overseas vote outstanding at last check was sub 12,000, maybe, because 30% typically are never returned. They're requested and they just never make it back. They have until Friday. You know, based on what happened with the presidential, it'll be a much lower number than that. It's not enough to change. Even if all of it went to one candidate or the other, it's not enough to change the outcome there. So that's interesting to take a look at. In the Warnock-Loeffler race, we saw Warnock take really kind of a more breakout lead than Ossoff. That's why the race was called earlier. What this all comes down to is turnout. And it's fascinating because DeKalb County actually had more voters turn out for the runoff elections than for the general election, which included a presidential race. So usually when there isn't a presidential race on the ballot, there's a lower turnout, and then runoffs even have lower turnout than that. But as Gabriel Sterling with the Secretary of State's office pointed out, when you spend $500 million in a state, that's going to generate turnout. But there also was a tremendous amount of turnout for the one candidate who wasn't on the ballot, and that's Donald Trump. So there clearly Donald Trump was sort of a proxy on the ballot between Loeffler and Perdue, and it's very clear that that had an effect on the election. DeKalb County, though, became the story of the night because as the votes were counted in DeKalb County, it had this, there was a font of votes still available that ended up flipping the leads and also ended up determining the election. And when you say, okay, where did all those ballots come from? Because we have those conspiracy theories, even the president himself. Oh, of course they found more ballots. This tracks with what we saw in the general election. There were 360,000 votes in the general election. You can see there's a bigger turnout total that we had in DeKalb County, but we're not seeing some, more votes one way or the other, and the split is the same. What really came down to, though, was you had this area. You can to a degree call this the black belt in Georgia right here. So you've got a very strong African American population here, and you can see how this area has turned blue. Everybody talks about Chatham County, everyone talks about the Atlanta suburbs, and of course we did have Cobb, Gwinnett, some other counties in the metro turn blue recently, but you've got these areas too, and some of these are very populous or more populous areas than the areas that are deeper red. These are very rural areas, these deep red areas, and then of course extreme North Georgia. And a number of pundits have pointed out that you have these, you really don't have one state of Georgia. I think we all know that. There's like these different countries within Georgia, and there really are two Georgias. Unfortunately, we're also seeing the two Americas right now on full display in the nation's capital.
Could you imagine, Brendan, any other scenario where two Democrats winning U.S. Senate seats for the state of Georgia, including the first African American ever to be elected to the Senate from the state of Georgia, flipping the control of the United States Senate, would somehow kind of fall away out of the microscope under the current reality and chaos that's happening in the very chamber that they are elected to serve in?
Cheryl, I've been a reporter for 30 years as of next month. February 4th, I'll have completed 3 decades as a journalist in every market size, 2 tours, combat tours in Iraq, covering all around the world. I never thought I would see the control of the United States Senate essentially in the hands of 3 different groups in the same month. Republicans, a siege mob, and then the Democrats, all within a matter of weeks.
All right. Yeah. there just really aren't words, Brendan, and we just wonder where does the country go from here. Thanks for the analysis. I know you have been working nonstop since those very first votes came in, and we appreciate all of the time. Thank you so much. For the latest results, head to 11alive.com. You can also send them right to your phone. If you'd like to see all the work that's been done by our incredible numbers team, just text this word RESULT to 404-885-7600.
The chaos in D.C. overshadowing the Georgia Senate runoffs this evening. So let's go now to Andy Parati, who's been following the two Democratic candidates today on what their projected wins mean to them and their families.
So far, Raphael Warnock has issued a statement in response to the unrest in the Capitol. In the meantime, OSSOFF and Warnock both released video statements earlier today directly speaking to Georgians who did not vote for them. Tonight, a Black Atlanta pastor and a Jewish millennial small business owner declare victories in Georgia's race for the U.S. Senate.
I am going to the Senate to work for all of Georgia.
I thank the people of Georgia for electing me to serve you in the United States Senate.
John Ossoff posted this video at 8 a.m. pledging to address the pandemic and the economy while speaking directly to the millions of Georgians who did not vote for him.
Whether you were for me or against me, I'll be for you in the U.S. Senate.
Reverend Raphael Warnock promised the same and urged unity.
No matter who you cast your vote for in this election, in this moment in American history, Washington has a choice to make. In fact, all of us have a choice to make.
Warnock, on course to be Georgia's first Black U.S. Senator, shared his mom's reaction.
Of course, she was glad to be speaking to her son, but as moms do, she reminded me that she's still mama, therefore she's in charge. And I'm very clear about that.
Warnock says he hopes his story inspires young people that they can achieve the American dream. Ossoff also thanked his wife, who is an OBGYN already back to work in the hospital.
And how did these two candidates get to this projected victory? We now go to Naima Abdullahi with more on the efforts from one Metro Atlanta county in particular that played a key role in these election results. Naima?
Natisha, we know that DeKalb County had the nation's attention last night, and the turnout of DeKalb County was not a surprise, but because of the timing of when it exactly happened, it was able to get the nation's attention. But we also want to highlight another county that also deserves the spotlight, and we've been able to break down the numbers in Rockdale County. Rockdale County showed more interest in the Democratic candidate Senate runoff election than for the Democratic candidate during the presidential election in November. The key to victory for both parties in the runoff election was to outperform the margin won by their parties in the November election, and Democrats were able to accomplish that. Some of the biggest gains came from Rockdale County. John Ossoff outperformed Biden by 2.45%, and Raphael Warnock outperformed Biden by 2.65%. Though the difference may appear small, it also plays into the demographic shift and population change in the county. Black voter turnout groups have been mobilizing and organizing to increase voter turnout, and they're satisfied with the results.
I think what we see right now is that there is a desire of a broad coalition in the state to literally move forward and really transform this state to be the state that we all deserve and that we all work for and we envision.
And political analysts and commentators are saying this is only the beginning for Georgia as a battleground state. This is an indication of exactly what will happen in future elections, where the state could possibly continue to draw nationwide attention into state elections and local politics as well. Back to you.
Naima, thank you so much. I want to mention, Natisha, that just a moment ago, outgoing Georgia Senator Kelly Loeffler made her first statement on the violence, the siege at the U.S. State Capitol, telling supporters last night, as you remember, that she was heading to D.C. this morning to object the certification of the electoral votes. She is in Washington, D.C. at this point. Here is what Senator Loeffler just wrote on Twitter. Violence is abhorrent, and I strongly condemn today's attacks on our Capitol. We must stand united as one nation under God. I'm grateful for our brave men and women of law enforcement. May God bless America. Again, that came just a few minutes ago, our first statement from outgoing Senator Kelly Loeffler on the violence and chaos happening on the steps of the state capitol as we speak. We're going to wrap up our digital stream at this point. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll have more breaking news updates for you here on 11alive.com and throughout the evening on our broadcast.